Hi, I'm Kitze and this is the final tutorial in the Learning Sizzy tutorial series. Today we're going to explore all the settings in Sizzy along with all the features and options that I might have missed in the previous videos. So let's jump into the settings, and I'm going to actually go only through the features that I find more interesting. Like, you can explore the settings, and as you can see, we allow you to customize everything in the app, but I'm not going to go over and read you all the options when you can see them for yourselves. So let's just go through the tabs. I'm gonna go in the security tab. This is super interesting. If you want to disable course, if you're tired of these errors when you're trying to fetch something from another domain and so on and so forth, you can just disable and enable course here. After enabling it or disabling it, the entire app has to reload. And now you're gonna see that now I can just disable course, entire app reloads. Super useful for development. In Workspace tabs, of course, my neighbor decides to drill every single time I turn on the camera. He's like, time for drilling. Hopefully you're not going to hear the noise. I explained in the previous videos that you can pin certain devices and presets as tabs. So you can see if I pin this one, if I pin this one, and if I pin a couple of presets here, you're going to see they appear as oops, I just clicked the preset. Anyway, even better. I'm going to click around. You're going to see that I'm going to focus on a device, focus on a device, focus on a preset. So we can basically easily switch between presets and particular devices. So what I can do from the settings is I can customize how these workspace tabs look like. So I can choose, for example, to show the icon only, and I can choose I can separately choose for the pin preset. So maybe for the pin presets, I'm gonna go with icon only, and for the devices I'm gonna go icon and title. And if I want, I can group them in colors. So I'm gonna say I want the background to be different for devices and for presets. So your presets are gonna be shown as icons here, your devices are gonna be shown as actual tabs with the names and the icons, and they're gonna be grouped by color. I got used to not using the workspace tabs as much, but this is super useful if you maybe want to tab all of your devices, and instead of seeing a huge two rows list of all the devices, you can just easily pin them and they're going to appear as one row. You can toggle this with Control-Shift-B or Command-Shift-B on macOS. So we allow you to customize that. One of the modes that I forgot to mention in the first video is Zen Mode. Zen Mode works in combination with all the other modes, and in settings you can choose what do you want to hide when using Zen Mode. As you can see, by default everything will be hidden. So if you only want to see your device, you can press Z and you can see now everything disappears. So if I go in responsive mode and I see my devices here, let's say I want to show them in let's just zoom them in, but I don't want to see my console, my debugging panel, and all sorts of things around the devices, I can just press Z, which is going to go in Zen Mode, and I can just focus on my devices. This works even better if you have like one device, and in Zen Mode you can just take this window and you can just drag it to the edges like this. So if you have a small monitor, you can keep this device in the corner, still fully functional, but you can use it in Zen Mode. You don't have to have the entire app open in order to just have a preview on one device. So as I said, you can combine Zen Mode with any of the modes. So you can be in any of the modes. You can press Z to toggle Zen Mode. Let me jump back to responsive mode now. All right, moving on, we have downloads. So maybe you're not even going to trigger the downloads manager in Sizzy, but just so you know, especially if you're using the reference browser for browsing, if you have a download button, don't be afraid to click it. Sizzy has a downloads feature. You're going to get your downloads here in a pop-up, and here you can choose your downloads folder. We have options for the undocked windows. These are important. So you can choose what happens when you're clicking on the icon of the reference browser and of the debugging panel. So whether you want to just focus the window or whether you want to toggle the window. So for example, I'm going to choose this to be toggle window. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undock the reference browser first in order to be able to show you this feature. So I'm going to undock the reference browser, and you're going to see that when I click this icon, this window is going to be recreated because I chose the behavior to be toggle. Clicking on it will open it, clicking on it will close it. Same thing we can do for the debugging panel, but I don't need to show you. It's the same behavior. So here now I'm going to choose focus window just to show you what is the difference. So if I have focus window, if I defocus this reference browser, which I'm going to drag here, And if I lose it, so it's behind my window now when I click it, it's just going to come in focus, but I'm not going to toggle it on and off. It's just going to be focused or defocused. So clicking on this will just bring it to focus. So let me not forget about this, just dock it back, close it, moving on with the settings. You can also choose, if you're planning to use these windows undocked, you can toggle these two settings in order to keep them open on startup. So if you keep, for example, the debugging panel undocked, and you have that option on, when your app launches, you wouldn't have to manually open the debugging panel. It's going to open when the app starts. So you can choose that here. Next up, we have location. So it's pretty nicely explained in the settings. If you want to use geolocation requests in Sizzy, you have to provide your own API key, because in Google Chrome, you don't need to have to do that because they provide their own API key. In Sizzy, you would have to provide your own API key if you want to use geolocation requests. Next up, we have the debugging panel, which I explained in the first or the second video, which you can find in this playlist. So I'm not going to go through all of the options here. I think that I explained everything. Moving on to Toolbar. I also explained this in the first video. If you want to get rid of all of these buttons, you can just disable them from here. Or again, I'm going to mention it again. You can right click anything in the toolbar in Sizzy, and you can choose to hide any of the icons here, whether it's a plugin or normal icon or an icon on the left or URL bar icon, anything can be hidden, and you can also do that from here. I think I didn't, yes, I did show the differences in the showing the align modes. I didn't show these things in the address bar. So the address bar can be expanded to take all the available space. When you click save, that feature is broken because we recently made the toolbar responsive. So if you have a very small Sizzy window, you can see that this adapts to the window. So when we introduced that feature, we basically completely broke our where was I? Toolbar, address bar. We completely broke this feature. So the address bar won't expand to take the available space, but we're gonna fix that soon. So here you can choose the maximum width. So if you want to have a smaller address bar, you can just choose that here. I don't need to show you every single feature. Hide icons from the URL bar and show them on hover. This is important if you want to declutter URL bar. So I'm going to click just to show you how does this work. This will now show one icon, as you can see here, and the rest of them will be just shown on hover of this area. Now when I go out, they'll be shown, hidden, shown, hidden. If you want to have them there visible all the time, you can disable this, and you can also disable individual icons, and the ones that are here, you can just easily reorder them and show only the ones that you're planning to actually use. Next up in the toolbar, we have, by the way, these two are not shown now because I don't have an active project. When I have an active project, these two will be shown. Next up, we have buttons, which I think I already showed. You can disable any of these buttons here, the filters, the photo studio, preset, session manager, and so on and so forth. And you can choose whether you want to simplify the style. So if I click save here, you're going to see these icons will look like this. They're not going to have any borders around them. And the last option here is if you want to save even more space, you can show the refresh icon inside the URL bar. I prefer it that way. If you don't like that, the refresh icon can be next to the navigation button. As I said, we allow you, because people were complaining about we would choose to do things one way and people would complain, then we would switch to another way, people would complain. So we decided to make everything as customizable as possible because everyone has different preferences. All right, so which one? I want this one inside the URL bar. Next, we're moving on to Butler. I explained Butler in the previous video, so I'm going to skip all of these things. Console, I explained it in the videos for the console. Projects, nothing interesting to see here, except maybe we can show how we can add a custom code editor. So when we are adding a code editor, let's say I want to add Vim for some reason, I can call this Vim and I can specify where does it, the actual command to open the editor. So usually you would point to the binary of the editor. So we have a couple of predefined editors, but you can, if you want, you can delete them. You can add your own editors. So when you're, let me just enable projects here quickly. When you have a project and you want to open it in editor, this will be the editor that the project opens in. And as I said, you can add your own editors here. We have an option regarding moving the protected groups to the bottom in projects, because when you're in projects, you can mark some groups as protected, as hidden. So let's say I don't want anyone to see my experiments here. So I'm going to go here and make this group protected. So you're going to see that this one will move to the bottom. I will know what it is based on the emoji, but people on my live stream and no one else when I'm doing recordings can know what those projects are. Super secret, cannot share. Sadly, I've forgotten about those projects and probably they're never going to see the light of day, but let's pretend they're super secret things. They're going to change the world one day. So that's that option, whether you want to move them to the bottom or just keep them in between. Totally not important. In the reference browser, I think I showed a couple of options, but let's go through them again. You can choose your search engine for the reference browser. I showed this option, whether you want to show the pin tabs vertically or you want to show them as normal tabs. Lock keyboard shortcuts to horizontal tabs only. So when you have the tabs pinned vertically in the reference browser, I'm going to open it now. When you press Control 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going to see that we're only, we start here with 1. But if we want, we can have Control 1 to be for one of these tabs, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but we still added the option. Whether you want to navigate only to these tabs here, or you would want to navigate to this ones with your keyboard when you press Control. And you can also press Control Tab. I hope it's Tab on Windows. Yeah, it's Tab. So with Control Tab, you can either navigate these horizontal tabs or you can navigate also the vertical tabs. You can choose that behavior in settings. Here you have some options regarding whether you want to keep the tabs in memory. So here I choose that I want to keep the tabs in memory for 15 minutes since last visited. And when it's actually closed, I can choose not to keep them in memory or to keep them for 15 minutes. That means that if I decide to keep them in memory like this, when I open the reference browser, the websites will be ready and they're not going to reload. So you see, I'm going to close it, I'm going to open it, and the tab is ready because I decided to keep them running in the background. But be careful, keeping them in memory will of course take more memory and your app will become slower. So do this only if you have enough resources to do this. Otherwise, you can choose not to keep them in memory. So when you not keep them in memory, they're going to reload all the time, which for most websites, it shouldn't be a problem. They load fast. So as you navigate to the website, it's going to actually load the page. Next up, we have performance, which has a lot of options regarding what do you want to keep in memory, whether you want to keep all the devices in memory, which has a bunch of sub options for which devices do you actually want to keep in memory. I honestly don't turn this on at all because the app can become very slow if you turn this on. Basically, all the hidden devices that are in the background will keep their website loaded in memory, and just imagine like 20, 30 websites running in memory all the time. That's not really a good idea. If you have the resources, you can turn this on. This is regarding keeping the dock DevTools in memory because they also reload when you navigate to the DevTools, you can see that they reload. Do they reload? I think so. I think the option is for that. Keep them in memory. It looks like they're kept in memory. Oh, I think this is for regarding keeping all the DevTools in memory, because you can see that when I inspect, for example, iPhone 8 Plus, we will get a reload. When I inspect iPhone 8, we will get a reload. And if you want to keep all of these DevTools in memory, you can do that, but definitely not recommended because it's going to take a lot of resources. We have so many options, and over the course of more than 1.5 years we've been working on Sizzy, we added so many features that even I started forgetting what do we have in settings. I showed all the settings regarding screenshots in the previous video, which is specifically made for screenshots, so I'm not going to go through them here. Same for Photo Studio. Next up, we have device. So we can choose here whether we want to show the device scroll bars and whether we want to show the network indicator outline. If we show the network indicator outline, and I simulate a slow network, let's say I'm going to go in the network manager for this device and I'm going to simulate slow 3G. And here I'm going to go in the network manager, I'm going to simulate fast 3G. So here you will get this icon that reminds you that you simulate different network speed. But if you don't want to see the header, you still want that reminder. When we disable the header, you're going to get this pulsing outline to remind you, hey, the network speed is low. That's why your website is low. But that's only there if you don't have a header. If you have a header, this will always remind you. So in device, we have that option, and you can choose to show the device scroll bars always, which usually you don't want to do this because on a real mobile device, you wouldn't get these scroll bars. Do this. I don't know in which scenario, honestly, you would do that. Let me reset the network settings so I don't get a slow website here. And let's move on. What else do we have? As I said, let's reset the scroll bars and let's move on. We have audio. In audio modes, you can choose whether you want to unmute all devices. Not recommended because all the devices are going to play video, or to mute them, or to unmute only the first device. The default is this because only the first device is going to play sounds. The rest of the devices are going to be muted by default. Manage devices, I explained it in the first video. So from here, if you really hate seeing some of these devices everywhere in Sizzy, you can just disable them. And if I disable this Galaxy S7 and 9 devices, I'm not going to be able to find them in the Sizzy drawer. So no more Galaxies here. And I'm not going to be able to find them if I search for Galaxy S7 here in the Butler. You're going to see that those devices are completely disabled. You can watch the first video if you want to learn more about this tab. Next, we have the shortcuts tab. Unfortunately, they're still not customizable. So they're hard-coded shortcuts, but we have a lot of shortcuts for everything. And you can find them in settings, shortcuts. Next up, we have DevTools extensions. I don't think that I mentioned, no, I think that I mentioned that. Yep, mentioned that when I was talking about the DevTools panel. So if you want to add your DevTools extensions here, you can see I have components and profiler for my from React DevTools. You can also click here to jump into DevTools extensions. You can install any extension, and if you're missing a DevTools extension, not any Chrome extension, but a DevTools extension, you can click request an extension here. You can put the name and the URL, and we will get a ping from you. And if it makes sense to include it in Sizzy, we're going to include it in Sizzy, and you would get it right away. Next up, we have license and support. Here, you can submit a bug directly from Sizzy. So you can type in the name, the title of your bug. You can choose the category. You can describe the bug in the editor. You can drag some images, videos, so on and so forth. You can click submit. If you don't have an account on Fungazione, which is a service that I started building for, it's going to be a long description. So Fungazione, you can submit your bug reports, you can submit your feature requests and so on and so forth right from within Sizzy. So you need to have an account. If I click submit, I would have to have an account. Otherwise, you can quickly create an account and your request will be submitted from within Sizzy, but you can still go to fungazione.com to log into your account to see your open requests and so on and so forth. This is the fastest way that you can ping us about an issue or something that we need to fix. So you should definitely use this. If you want, you can use it from within the app. Otherwise, you can use it from the website. Next up, we have manage license, which is just gonna take you to the page for managing your license. And the last important tab that we have in settings is backups and import. So after a couple of lost backups and frustrated customers way back when we started Sizzy, we decided to auto backup all of your settings. I think on a 15-minute interval or something. So every 15 minutes, we're gonna back up, and for every day, basically you can see that I have my backups from like 70, 84 days ago, 95 days ago, 102 days ago. So I have all of my backups here, and I can easily just go back to any point in time, and I can see, oh yeah, here I have 29 projects, 36 devices, 6 presets. I would like to go back to this one. And when I click import, I can choose what exactly do I want to import from this backup. So you don't have to import everything. Maybe you can say, well, I missed some of my projects. Maybe I should just import the projects. You can uncheck all of the options, and you're going to import only the project. You can also import from file, which is going to let you pick from disk. So if you want to sync your Sizzy configuration between multiple computers, you can easily do that. You can export it as a file here. You can click, you can export it as a file, and then you can sync that file with your cloud or whatever cloud provider you're using for syncing files. And then on the other computer, you can do import from file, and you can just easily import it from that file. So yeah, we give you automatic backups, and you can also do manual backups, import, export, or reset your entire config. In About, you can choose whether you want to be on the stable channel, whether you want to be on the beta channel, whether you want to be on the alpha channel. We release more, of course, alpha and beta releases than we do stable, but you take all the risks that come with being on the unstable update channel. And here you can choose whether you want to send us crash reports and completely anonymous usage and statistics. I send an email to all of the users, and you can also read it in our privacy policy, and you can read it here that all of the data that we collect about you is completely anonymous, and Sizzy doesn't store any, even locally. If you open your Sizzy config, you will not find any local history, because we don't have a feature for recording history. Even if we did, your history will be going from localhost 3033 to localhost 3075. So it's not really useful to even give that to you, that option to you. So all of the data that we collect is collected using Mixpanel. You can actually read it in the privacy policy. And TLDR is, we basically track which features are mostly used and how many of the things that we add to Sizzy are used and how many of them are ignored, just so we can know what to prioritize and what to work on based on the way that you use Sizzy. But in any case, we don't take your IP address, we don't take your email, we don't take any of those things when we're reporting this Mixpanel stats. You can join our Slack community by clicking here, and you can be part of our Slack community. Now I'm gonna go to my, where's my to-do list? Oh, I disabled my to-dos. Wait a second, let me enable my to-dos. So I covered course, I covered the update channels. We have 3 things left, and I managed to explain every single feature that we have in Sizzy. I think probably I missed a couple, but we're getting there. So URL editor is something that we added for editing very annoyingly long URLs. So I'm gonna go to, which site can have an annoyingly, okay, I'm gonna go to notion.so, and I'm gonna focus in one device, and I'm gonna go and click login and continue with Google. And you're gonna see here that this is a very complicated and annoying URL to edit, right? In order to, like, first of all, you cannot visually separate it, what is going on in this URL. Second, in order to edit it, you need to first click, then click the second time, and make sure you're editing the right things and so on and so forth. But this URL is composed from gazillion of things, right? So if you ever want to edit your URL in a more visual way, we added the URL editor. Just thought of something else. QR code pop-up. And if you open the URL editor, you will see the broken down version of this URL. So we're gonna see on the left side, we have accounts.google.com. So if I wanna edit just one part, let's say that I wanna go to developer.google.com, I can just edit this in a nice form. Then I can edit the paths of the URL. So OAuth 2, V2, auth, whatever. I can just edit these paths here, or I can add new ones. So I can add new path. You're going to see the paths are automatically encoded for a URL. So I can add more paths without actually messing with the URL. I can add, I can delete some of the old paths. So I'm basically constructing the URL visually. I can, what is the longest thing here that takes so much? I think it's state, or maybe it's redirect, or maybe it's client ID. And here the last part is query params. So you can, let me just delete all of these query params just so we can simplify the URL. If I want to add a query param, I can say user equals 123, or pet equals a cat and whatever. And when I click go, I'm going to go through to this URL. Of course, Google's going to be like, where the hell are you taking me? This page doesn't exist. But I was just trying to show you how we can edit a very complex URL just by doing this. And you might not think at this moment, maybe it's useful, but not that much. But trust me, when you're like, this can take a lot of time, especially when you're playing with different URL configurations, and it's easier to just pop this editor, edit the thing that you want to edit, and just click on go instead of just messing and finding the portion that you want to edit. Especially when you're playing with a lot of query params, you can easily add, delete, and just go to that URL. So we're done with the URL editor. Delete. I deleted all of my to-dos because I'm not very smart. I don't know what I wanted to do, but I know that we had a QR Popup, open HTML file, and navigation sync. Yeah, those are the 3 last things that we need to talk about, and we're done. So QR Popup, I have to also enable it. It's called page info basically. So the page info, because there's no title bar in Sizzy, so we don't know what is the title of this page, I can easily go to I, and this is going to show me the title bar. And also, this gives me a QR code that if I scan it with my phone, it's basically going to open the current page on my phone. But with a very awesome feature, if you're on localhost, for example, if I'm on localhost 3000, instead of finding my IP address and opening it on my phone and typing in my IP address with the port, the QR code will be your local address plus the port that you're on. So instead of going to localhost 3000 on your phone, which is not going to work because your phone doesn't know what is localhost 3000, we're going to get the IP address from your computer, your local IP address, and basically generate a QR code. So even when you're testing in Sizzy, you can quickly check how your website will look like on an actual device. If you're like, yeah, I don't trust Sizzy that much. I mean, I use it for hours. I think my website is fine. Let me do one last check and check it on my phone. You can easily open this, scan the code, and it's going to convert from localhost to your IP address, and you're going to be able to quickly open the website on your phone. That is the QR pop-up. Next, we have open HTML file, something I wanted to mention, that you can go to menu, file, open HTML in order to open any HTML file. And the last one that we have is navigation sync. I don't think that I mentioned that one in the previous videos. I'm really not sure if I mentioned it in the first video or not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to twizzle.app and show you how this works. So when we scroll in one device, you can see that all of the devices scroll. This is honestly my least favorite way to bring all devices to the same portion of the app. And let me just explain that one last time why. So I'm going to drag an iPad here, and we're going to go actually to sizzy.co. I'm just going to disable the animations because I don't want them to. Okay, cool. So if we sync scroll, if the scroll is synced, I can never get these iPhones to be on the same section as the iPad because they're different heights. So it's not possible to bring them to the same section all the time. So I can scroll, and we tried, we tried to write an algorithm that's going to scroll them to the same portion, but it's not exactly possible because they have different widths. Some of the elements are differently aligned, and eventually they are not really in the perfect sync. So my favorite way of bringing all of the devices to the same portion of the app is either use the page navigator to navigate to different sections. So when you navigate to sections, you will see that all devices will go to the section, or navigate to elements, so you can type in features or pricing, and this is gonna jump to pricing. So that's my favorite way. If you still want to use the scrolling, which doesn't neglect that you might want to also use the scrolling in combination with this. So if you want to use the scrolling, we have two ways, which eventually we want to merge at some point into just one way of sync scrolling and syncing. So you can choose between navigation V1 and navigation V2. So V1 is our own built-in, we wrote this algorithm for the navigation, and V2 is using browsersync, which is already a library for syncing scroll between devices. So we allow you to choose between the two. There are differences. As I said, eventually we want to merge them. We want to have only one way of navigation. So with navigation V1, you can also choose here whether you want to synchronize the scroll or not. If you don't want to synchronize the scroll, you can see that I can scroll them individually, and the scroll is not going to be synced between them. So I can go back here and I can enable the scroll. And one option that we have in our scroll implementation that we don't have in V2 is absolute scroll sync. And that is, if I want to jump using the selector to pricing, but I still want to scroll the devices a little bit, but I want to scroll them equally, not dependent on their height. I want to scroll as much as I scroll. I want all of them to scroll that much. You see, like all of them scroll exactly how much I scrolled. So this is personally my favorite way of navigating in Sizzy. So if I want to go, I first go to the element that I want to go to, like features. And then I'm like, wait, but I want to bring this to the top a little bit. Then I can scroll them. And then I can be like, okay, this is the section that I want to work on. And then I work on this section. If I don't have absolute scroll sync, the scroll is synced basically dependent on the height of the devices. So I can scroll, but they're not going to be the equal. It's not going to be the equal amount of scroll. It's going to be depending on the device height and other factors. So in our navigation V1, the clicks are not synced. So if I go to twizzle.app and if I go in navigation V1, you're going to see that when I click this dark mode thingy, it's not clicked on the other devices. But if we switch to V2, we can see that we have synchronized scroll and synchronized forms, which means this is going to synchronize buttons, it's going to synchronize clicks, it's going to synchronize everything else. So when I click here, all of the devices will react nicer, right? So you get trade-offs, and as I said, it's going to be better if we merge them eventually at some point. But if you're working with single page apps, and if you have issues with reloading or Sizzy doing something crazy with the navigation, it's safer to move to V2 and just use V2. You still get the sync scroll, so you get the browser sync scroll, and you get the synchronization of clicks, and you also get the synchronization of forms. So when you type in one form, you can see in all of the devices, the same thing is going to be typed. And yeah, now that I show you this, it seems like V2 is way better, and I have no idea why would you use V1. Maybe for the absolute scroll sync. I don't think so. I think I'm mostly staying on V1 with absolute scroll sync, unless when I need to actually sync clicks, then I switch to V2, and I make sure to also synchronize the forms and the clicks and the buttons and so on and so forth. Did we hit 30 minutes? Perfect. Exactly 30 minutes. I think that I covered every single feature that we have in Sizzy. Thank you very much. If you watched all the videos, I really appreciate you. If you only watched this video, still appreciate you. You're a champion for watching a 30-minute tutorial on an app. Hopefully everything that I explained is going to be super useful to you. We're always working on Sizzy. So every 2 weeks, we're going to have a new release. We're going to add new features. And here on this channel, I'm going to describe all of the new features and all of the new stuff that we're building. So if you're interested in that, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.